Hello, everyone. I'm Mary Ann Brown, Senior Director of Operations for Forum, and welcome to today's webinar, Staying on Top, Resources and Advice for Small Businesses and Their Partners in Changing Times. If you experience any problems during the webinar and need to contact me, please reach out to me in the chat. And if you have any questions as the event goes on, please place them in the Q&A box and the team will address them at the end of the presentation. We are so glad you could join us today for what we know will be a fun and enlightening discussion. And so to kick things off, we're going to welcome President and CEO of Forum, Scott Robinson.
Thanks so much, Mary Ann, and welcome today, everybody. I'm excited to join you and talk about a subject that is very near and dear to many businesses, both large and small, including forums, and that is how to effectively navigate the many challenges faced by our industry in light of recent executive orders and other mandates. Forum is proud to partner with G2X and bring you webinars like this that we hope you find informative, like this session. Our hope is that you will get the right information to make the most sound decisions for your business. Really excited, like I said, about today's agenda. We're going to explore the myriad challenges happening for small businesses and public sector tech, and there are many. But we also want to talk about how to best navigate those challenges for continued success. We'll also discuss how or what these changes mean for small businesses and their larger corporate partners. So how entities of all sizes can still triumph in the face of these new and competing challenges. And we'll do a deep dive demonstration of G2X's new Federal Resource Center tool. It's designed to help small businesses navigate our industry's current transitions and challenges, and also offer you some valuable information and also information for medium and large businesses as they work through these challenges as well. Joined by me today are three industry experts and colleagues who can definitely shed some light on the current environment in GovCon and provide you with some worthwhile answers. We have Traci Walker. She's the Executive Director of Digital Services Coalition. Keith Kawasaki, the Director of Growth and Partnerships at CivicActions. And Ron Jones, the CEO of G2X. Welcome, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. So, Traci, let's jump right in and get things started. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career and your current work with the Digital Services Coalition?
Sure, and thank you for having me here today. I have been a IT federal contracting officer for 15 years. I started at GSA in Kansas City. I went to the DC area and then eventually started doing the IT contracts for the White House started under the Bush administration and went to the Obama administration. And then when U.S. Digital Service was created, they looked at the fact that there needed to be there was a challenge with technology as well as procurement. So I had been working on some new ways to do iterative development, procurements, agile procurements, and got pulled into the U.S. Digital Service when it started and became their first director of procurement. So I left government in 2021 and I became the first executive director of the Digital Services Coalition, which is a nonprofit trade association which supports roughly 50 small to mid-sized businesses that are really doubling down on how to improve digital transformation in not just the federal space, but local and state governments as well. And we are we're open for new members right now, so put that call out there. And then also, as you'll talk to Keith, happy to see that CivicActions is here, who's one of our members as well. So I'm really excited around being able to help support the mission of changing government from the industry perspective.
Excellent. That is great. So let's jump right in and talk about these new challenges that I was speaking about for small businesses that can affect their relationships with the government. Traci, how do you see these changes affecting the ability for small businesses to engage with the government at the same levels that they normally would or have been? I mean, has there been kind of an attrition of government outreach or things of that nature that people have to kind of navigate now? And if you could speak a little bit on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, I've been in the government for quite a while, so I've seen many different transitions, and procurement is always going to undergo challenges with new administrations, and small businesses often feel those shifts the most acutely because they have the fewer resources to absorb uncertainty. So how do you bring that into your own culture, and what can you do to kind of think through that? But I think the call to action here is that industry doesn't have to wait on government right now to get moving or to be able to do things. I was just talking with someone earlier today around the ability for them to potentially be on an industry panel. And their concern was that there wasn't going to be enough government people in the room. So why should they attend and what were they going to get out of that? And I was a little frustrated by that answer because I think that all government businesses right now can use this time as a call to action to work together to do common things that help the industry in general, like evaluation panel approaches that might streamline competition. We all know what works and what doesn't, what we like and what doesn't work for that. How can we come together and maybe put something together that says, here's how we'd like it to see it done? Having collaboration on industry standards, especially in technology, digital services, AI, what does that look like? And bringing the tech, I have the background in technology, but it could work for any industry as well. Or as I mentioned with the AI piece, there's a lot of unknown around how to bring AI into government environments. What training and what standards can we be creating as an industry to say, here's how we protect government when we start using it in government, and how can we start thinking through that? So again, we do not have to wait for government to be the leader in this. We can be the industry partners that come through and say, here's what commercial industry is doing, and let's figure out the delta between what needs to happen to implement those changes or practices or policies in faster and efficient way in government environments. And I would say also looking at how to, partner and making those opportunities more mature as well within kind of like the small business to big business. I will talk about that in a second, but looking here today, like what CivicActions did with you all, and we'll talk to that in a second, but just saying here we see a need, how can we help? Let's make this bigger and beyond ourselves and coming to that call to action.
Definitely, really great points to consider. I appreciate that. So back to the kind of day-to-day work that these small businesses are doing. I loved your suggestion about kind of using this time to maybe think about those standards, think about how to work with other industry folks to kind of make things better for everyone. But how do you expect these changes to affect technology service delivery as it relates to government engagements, for small business, and how do you see that kind of morphing or changing given a lot of the different parameters that are kind of shifting now?
One of the recommendations we're working on within the Digital Services Coalition, and I'd say to kind of everyone here, is looking what areas of the market have you not researched before or thought of as an opportunity? Are you familiar with SBIRs, the small business research programs? Are you familiar with challenges that still might be going on? OTAs, other transactional authorities, there's still work being done in the DoD on OTAs. What are there areas and mechanisms that you might research? State and local work, even education work. There's still a lot of opportunities to, if you are committed to the mission of helping public improve, public infrastructure and public services improve, where else can you find work? And there's a lot of states that are standing up right now, like Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, California, that are all saying, help, we need help in this world right now. Bring what you've learned in the federal government to us and help us improve as well. Another thing that you might think through is what other technology stacks might you join in or be part of that maybe you're expanding beyond what you kind of think through. A lot of the DSC companies are open source purists, which I love, and that's great. But maybe there's opportunities in low code, no code platforms that they might not have researched before. How do you become a Salesforce partner? How do you become a ServiceNow partner? Like, what are those opportunities that you could see out there that's like, maybe this wasn't what we thought we were going to do, but now we might need to expand and look through that. So understanding what else is out there might be a really good place to start and thinking through that and using those networks and connections that you see to get more education around that.
That's excellent. And speaking of networking and connections, I know Marianne's posted that message in the chat. Everybody who's on the call, feel free to share your information with others that may be on the chat. You never know; could be your next partner, could be your next business venture together. So go ahead and do that in the chat if you will, and feel free. But yeah, that's excellent, Traci. And thinking about kind of things that small business can do to kind of change the way that they're kind of working, change the trajectory of their work on these engagements with new technology and other means. And also, you touched upon earlier the connection between small businesses and those medium to large businesses. So, if we're talking about forging stronger relationships with the large business partners, if you're a small business, making sure the agency's mission is met or succeeded on these joint engagements, what advice would you give to the medium to large size businesses, and how can they support the success of these small businesses that they hopefully will invariably be working with at some point, and how can they support that success in this new landscape, in this new way of thinking?
I mean, I think one way is maybe looking at what are commercial opportunities that they might be able to partner on. Maybe you have a really good company that you work with in the government space and never really thought and considered they might be a good partner on some commercial work. Maybe helping them to understand if you've got a mentor-protege relationship, what does commercial work actually look like if you've got a company that's only ever worked in the government space? How do you help educate them or think through what they might need to make that jump if they need to figure out what are those opportunities and how that business works? Because it looks very different than the government processes. While it may seem faster and more streamlined, there's probably a lot more risk in certain areas. So what does it look like to have a better understanding of the risk of new markets that they might think through? Another thing is we know that larger businesses have a stronger lobby sometimes with the new
Mhm.
changes coming through. How can you help with the small business lobby and continuing to help push for the right kinds of contracts, going to the right kinds of companies and supporting that, whether it's through socioeconomic categories or whether it's through just expanding small business opportunities in different areas or thinking through that. And I think right now also we're seeing a major shift in the hiring needs
All right.
right now. There's a
Mhm.
lot of people who need new jobs. And so helping small businesses and also I think the industry as well, what does that look like for a whole lot of people who've come from the federal government industry into the private and commercial industry? What does it look like? And one of the big things we know is probably resumes don't look alike. How can you hold
Mhm.
resume review sessions to say, translating your GovCon resume to a tech
Private
industry
sector.
resume?
Yeah,
It's
right.
just a simple thing like that. And being
Mhm.
able to hold workshops jointly with your partners might be a really good way to indicate when people are down and out or having a hard time finding a job, seeing that companies came out and stood out and said, here's how I'm going to help, you always kind of remember that. And if you ever go back into government spaces again, you might still have that good association with how industry helped when there was a challenge with finding new opportunities. So thinking through those different ways, I think would be a really good way to expand on the resource guide and the things that is already happening, but thinking through, and of course, as we talk about it, contributing to this resource guide and other resource
Right.
guides as they're created or helping to expand on this general knowledge of I think this is the time when we all can come together and make each other stronger.
Yeah,
And again,
definitely.
uncertainty is just a part of the transition. We know this is going to happen. So how does it, how do we facilitate this and like I said, make ourselves stronger?
Excellent. That is great advice, and thank you so much, Tracy. I want to thank you for joining us today, actually,
Of course.
and for all the great work you're doing at Digital Services Coalition. And make sure if you're out there on the line that you do check out DSC online, and I believe it's just digitalservicescoalition.org, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Awesome.
We
That
also created a LinkedIn group recently
okay.
to help support. You can find it on the resource guide, but it's also to help connect people that have jobs with people who need jobs, whether that's losing
Great.
people losing a contract or people losing, a federal role. We're helping
Mhm.
to make the connections and source good job postings and information that's going out there. So we'd love to see people join us on that.
Excellent. That is awesome. And so please jot that down, folks. Digitalservicescoalition.org. And thank you, Tracy. I know you're sticking around with us, so we
Yep.
appreciate that too. So now I would like to introduce Mr. Ron Jones. He is the CEO of G2X, and he is the creator of their Federal Resource Center tool. And that's going to be the big crux of what we're speaking about next. So without further ado, Ron, welcome. So great for you to
Hey,
join us
Scott.
today.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Happy to be here. And
Absolutely. Awesome.
thanks
Awesome.
to all the attendees.
Yep, definitely. So let's talk a little bit, Ron, about where you came up with the idea and how you came up with the idea for the Federal Resource Center.
Yeah,
Kind of
actually,
given the shifts and
I-
changes we have going on.
I'll tell a quick story. So,
Great.
uh, 3 weeks ago, approximately, I was just helping the team get our Doge tracker up on our platform. just
Mhm.
kind of, helping support where I can. And Keith, who's here with us today, reached out and he said, "Hey, have you seen a slowdown in award decisions? Have you seen anything change?" And I kind of said, I can't say for certain, but what I do know is we've been tracking, some of the contract cancellations, and we just got into a little bit of a conversation. And for context, Keith is on our Slack. Many of our customers communicate with us on our Slack platform. And he reached out and we just started chatting, and he came up with this idea of a small business, preparedness kit or resource center,
Yeah.
right? And then we,
Mhm.
got to talking and, started, the idea started snowballing, and we had noticed that there were several folks out there, Shauna Weatherly, David Valencia from Department of
Mhm.
Transportation, many others that have been sharing really helpful information, but we couldn't, find a place
Aggregate it, right?
where,
Yeah.
yeah, where
Yep.
it was all aggregated, right? So
Mhm.
Keith had the bright idea actually, and we talked about, well, what if we just did it ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. I took a weekend
Great.
and put it together, and I won't take credit for the content. That's all the great folks in the community that have contributed, Civic Actions, Traci, Digital Services Coalition, and others. But yeah, I just put it together in a weekend, and got it populated with everything that folks have been sharing, and the rest is
Great.
history.
That's awesome. That's great. That's a great story indeed. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about just, with Keith, actually I'll bring you into the fray here, but how your role and Civic Actions role has been involved, as Ron mentioned, in kind of building out this federal resource center that we're about to show everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yep.
So as Tracy was talking about, fluctuations in GovCon, these aren't new challenges. Budget cuts, justification responses, taboo phrases. We've seen all this stuff before. And there was the Budget Act of 2011, took effect in 2013, like $85 billion reduced. To a lesser degree, there was the sequestration in 2021. And in those periods, you see Ostabu and clients kind of
Mhm.
turn inward, gets to be a little quiet. There's a lot of uncertainty. And then, through all of this, you're asked as a small business to do these quick turn justification things. And it can be really taxing because you're oftentimes in small business, you're one person who's doing HR, who's doing delivery, and who's doing biz dev. And the world just kind of can feel a bit chaotic. But some of us were around in 2013 and have been through this and many other
Mhm.
things before because it's always something.
Right.
Bar
You mentioned
deviations always
how it's
happen.
cyclical. Yeah, it
Right.
happens. I mean, it at varying levels of craziness,
Yeah.
but it happens, every 4 to 8 years. So yes,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Exactly. And so like Ron was saying, I thought I was special being on his Slack, but I guess everybody is. But anyway, so Ron and
Yeah.
I are friends, right? And so we're chatting, we're talking. And I was like, what if there was this emergency preparedness kit for small business without a paywall, with
Mhm.
immediately actionable content, and that's open for contributions because we don't know everything, and there's other folks who might have a great idea, and let's bring it all together and see what it looks like. And Ron, he has a huge heart for the industry, for the people of the industry, I should
Absolutely.
say. And he pulled his
Mhm.
team together immediately. Like he said, built it over a weekend. And then because he's like a wizard, he threw in this AI chatbot. And I was like, Ron, that's amazing. It's brilliant. And he's like, yeah, I just threw that in there. And so I think like everything about that is just really beautiful and a true testament to G2X and
Mhm.
and Ron and his team that pulled this all together so quickly. And because they saw a need, and like the Doge tracker, like everyone's on that thing
Yeah,
and
the Doge
using it.
tracker is
And
amazing.
so
Yeah.
leveraging that as well, it's like, hey, let me take this a step further. Not only show you what's happening, but how I can help you. I think
And
that's a
Ron,
really
hey Ron,
beautiful
really
thing.
quick, can you put the link to the Doge tracker in the chat too, just in
Oh yeah,
case folks
definitely.
haven't?
And
I bet everyone on this call has seen it, but if they
I
haven't, it'd be
appreciate the
great to put
kind
that in the chat.
words
Yeah, absolutely.
as well, Keith.
Excellent.
I'll drop the Doge tracker link in the
Okay.
comments here once I can pull it. Yep.
Okay, great. Appreciate that. And Keith, I wanted to touch on one thing that you and I spoke about before we ever started this webinar, and it was talking about balance, openness, and care, and how Civic Actions kind of moves forward with those things in mind. And I know you touched on how Ron, thought about, hey, our industry needs this. This is the time, and when we have to have something like this done very quickly. And he jumped on it and went ahead and did it and partnered with you to make sure that the Federal Resource Center is populated. But how do you kind of bring in that whole idea of openness or balance, openness, and care in things like the Federal Resource Center that you're working on with Ron?
I mean, that's really the foundation for everything. So when we're like, what are we going to put on this thing? Well, fortunately, last year we did an exercise at CivicActions. We had our leadership group together. I'm like, how would we endure and succeed in any number of situations, whether it's good, bad, or bonkers? And we all split up and like, okay, what are we going to come up with? And when everyone came back together and they shared their ideas, it all beautifully came together, and very easily you could see how everything leaned back on balance and openness and care. And that empathy and transparency just guides everything that we do at CivicActions. So when we're like, well, let's put our whole handbook up there, and Marianne, I'm sure could bring it up in to show it. It's on the site. It's on the resource center. And if you're a small business out there that hasn't been around for 20 years like us, maybe this is something that'll help you, because everything that we do in our handbook of how we approach our work, how we show up every day, goes back to that balance and openness and care, to take care of each other, to succeed together, and to share everything openly.
Great.
So yeah, it's on the site in its entirety. And then we're like, okay, well, where do we go from there? And so when I think it was Brittany Winkler on Ron's team started bringing in all this other content. And there's a lot of folks, and there's a lot of folks who are dealing with stop work orders. And so I think she had found the stop work order tips from Winston and Strawn, which was really awesome and succinctly tells you, okay, what is this thing? How do I get my head around it? With a stop work order, you also then to lose access to your work pretty quickly. So how are you going to maintain your past performance iteratively as it's going on? And that's something that we do at CivicActions. So Ariel Lebrecq, who's our digital services manager, has this tip sheet of how she does it. And she, being that we're open, we're like, hey, let's share this on the site. Let's share how we prepare and curate this living archive of our past performance. And so there's tips on there for that. And because if you don't have your past performance as the small business in GovCon, you're kind of dead in the water. So you have to maintain that iteratively as you go. And there's some really beautiful tips around that.
That's excellent. And very
one
timely.
more thing I'll share on there also is like, when you're asked to validate your program's existence, that can be a bit like startling, right? And if you're new to GovCon, it's like, what are you talking about? This is crazy. But like I said, there's folks around in our small business industry that have done this before. And so there's tips that we have also that we've put out there, because it helps you get in the mindset. Okay, you got this ask that sounds very daunting. Let me get myself first in the mindset, and then how do I approach it pretty clinically? So we have an approach for that at CivicActions, and we shared that up on the resource center as well. There's tons of resources out there, and there's more that we don't have, which goes back to that idea of, hey, contribute. Everybody out there, everybody who's watching this is an open resource. It's the way it really it's inspired by how CivicActions approaches everything, with an open source software community mindset where everything's free and open. Let's contribute back, but not only leverage what other folks have done, but what can I give back to this? And so Ron, beautiful thing that he did, he put the contribute link on the bottom of the page. And this is something that's just going to continue to grow. And I think that it's evergreen. It's not just important today, but tomorrow, the next day. And let's just see how it goes. Help each other out.
One thing I know you did that's out there, and thank you, Keith. It's fantastic, and I love the way that you've just aggregated all of this great information in one place. And I will reiterate the fact that yes, it is open source. So everybody who's on this call right now, if you have ideas on or have seen things that you think would be helpful to the rest of the group and anybody else in GovCon, please go ahead and send those send those pieces of information and those resources into Ron's team, and I believe it's at daily take at g2exchange.com. We can make sure we put that in the chat as well. And we can get those things together and actually add them to the different categories within the Federal Resource Center, because again, we're all in this together. I see some chat going on, not a lot of it. I'm trying to stay focused on the screen here, but it really does mean something to have everybody come together and really work together to make sure that everybody gets that information. So really appreciate that. Ron, I wanted to go back to that kind of introduction of the Resource Center. And I think it's there's a link here, and it kind of talks about management during uncertainty. And I just wanted to touch on that really quick. I don't know if we went into it too deep, but why do you think that's important to just make sure that everybody is kind of managing during uncertainty, and why do you think that's something that everybody should kind of be kind of tuned into right now?
Yeah, I mean, especially in a leadership role, right? You've got to, remain calm. You've got to think clearly, and you got to instill confidence in your team. You're ultimately there to you work for your team, right?
Right.
At least the way I look at it. It's not the other way around. From more of a servant leadership perspective, you're there to support your team and make sure that they feel, informed, that you're transparent with them, that they feel safe, right, in their jobs.
Right.
And during a time of uncertainty, like Keith mentioned, this has happened so many times before, but it is really important, because it becomes a distraction if you aren't being the anchor, the rock, right, for your
Right.
team, whether you're managing, 2 people or 200 people, right?
Mhm.
So I don't have a whole lot to say on that, but I think that pretty much sums it up.
Right.
But I
That's
love
great,
here
Ron.
also that it's bullet points. You don't have to have a big tool that you're contributing. You could just have an idea
Mhm.
that you're contributing, and we'll put it up there as a bullet point. So there's quite a few areas on the resource center. It's like, hey, here's just a good idea. It's by all means, like I think it'd be
Yeah.
great if more people contributed. Just they're good
And
ideas.
that's a great point, Keith. I think people may think it needs to be a 10-page paper or some big thing that they're
Mhm.
contributing, but even just ideas, like you said, in a bullet pointed fashion that people will just kind of look at and might give them some inspiration, might click and figure out a different way to do something. And Ron, thanks for your comments as well. It is um, a trying time for leaders within our space and in small business. You're wearing all the hats. So thinking about helping folks through these changes and as a good leader is very important as well. So that's great. Traci, did you have any thoughts around how the folks at the DSC can use the Federal Resource Center tool, or how you've heard of them using the different resources that are available?
I think, yeah, it's wonderful to see all of these the stuff curated. I think that is sometimes the biggest challenge we have, is getting everything in the one location.
Yeah.
As you're going through this and just thinking through some of the things that you have with legal resources and HR and employee support and career transition, like this sounds like it's a great start, but how are we going to take it and improve it to something that we don't need to have as a continual resource? How can
Right.
this be a curated thing? We're spinning something up because there's a need right now, but what does it look like as a long-term contribution? How can maybe
Right.
this become an open source, product itself? And we're seeing more and more contributions to what this looks like, and showing that a community can come together for the shared needs and experiences that they have and they want to share. So I think this is a great, starting as the MVP of something. And then I'm always thinking like, okay, what's the bigger, where do we go from here? And what does it look like down the road as well, which I always geek out about as well, and that comes to that. So looking, I think especially in the HR and employee support, how do we bolster that? When
Yeah.
we're talking about the people internally, the leadership is good, but how are you helping the people that are very uncertain down at the lower levels? How are you communicating things within your to your employees? Are there samples of good messages that we're getting, and curated responses that somebody got that said, "Oh, I felt really this was a useful letter for me to help with this." We're seeing some stuff come out of some of the counties that we put up here, like Arlington County and Loudoun County, that are giving these
Yeah.
resources out as well. So what can
Mhm.
we do with the local community? And I know you've got a spot for it, like the DMV area, but there are people in a lot of different places as well. So what are we not seeing in the regional resources beyond just the DMV area?
Right.
So yeah, I think just really kind of expanding and getting this out here and seeing where people are going to come back and contribute, because I think everyone does want to have a sense of agency right now where they're feeling like they're doing something in the lieu of, in lieu of knowing exactly what's going to happen.
Excellent. Excellent. And that reminds me, Howard County, Maryland has a lot of these tips and tricks, and I need to go ahead and add them. So you just reminded me, I'm going to reach out to my colleague who works for Howard County government and get some of that information to be able to put out
Perfect.
there. One other thing I know, I'm not sure if you touched on it very much, Keith, but I know it's very important. Just preparing and maintaining that impactful past performance and how that is so important for small business to be able to show where you've been with regards to the work that you've done on engagements. I know we have some information in the Resource Center about that. Do you mind touching on that as well?
Sure. Yeah. When you start work, you should start your past performance right up. Like, you've just finished your proposal, you've won the work, dive into it immediately and let it grow with you. Oftentimes, we're seeing more and more solicitations come out there in phases. And there's some thinking that that's somehow less taxing, but it often can be more so because you have a lot of hurry up and wait where it's like, okay, this is phase one is due in a week, get this done. Then you go through quiet and then it's like, oh, phase two is due in another week. And you have to all of a sudden pull things together. But if you're preparing all the time, then you're always ready. And maybe it's because the times that I grew up in where it's like the more you know with the NBC thing and
Yeah,
you
Star
know,
Wipes.
Boy Scouts is always like, be prepared.
Right.
It's like you have to live in this mindset of being a prepper. So
Mhm.
as we're seeing in phase one bids, there's a lot of what's your corporate experience, or it's just artifacts. And so you have to pull together all these different visual representations and workflows of work that you've done. And if you don't have access to the systems, because say you got a stop work order or something, then you're kind of up a creek. But if you're preparing
Mhm.
that as you go and as you have access, capturing all of that, keeping that
Mhm.
in a very organized resource for not only your teams that are doing the work, but for your business development team, then you're going to see this start to build. We have a Slack channel that's all about appreciations as well. And we
Mhm.
share, oh, this great milestone has occurred with these numbers. The numbers, the quantifiable percentage of change that you're creating is so important. So like when you do start that work, what's that benchmark that you're
Yeah.
starting at? And then how are you impacting it positively? Be capturing
Mhm.
that along the way. So then when you're asked to do these quick turn responses, you've got this already lined up and easy to
Lined up.
grab in any number of ways. It's really a la carte because every bid is different these days and
Yeah.
everyone's got their own little thing. And so it's like, okay, well, this one's asking for this. I'm going to pull this. This one's asking for this. I'm going to pull this. We're a
Right.
small business development team at Civic Actions, but because we work efficiently and we're constantly looking at how we can have these pieces ready to go, pulling those puzzle pieces together ends up being very, I want to say easy, but it's
Right.
we maintain our balance, which is key
Good.
because so many
Good.
folks in business development for a small business cannot maintain their balance, and it's nights and
Right.
weekends and it's craziness and there's a lot of
Mhm.
turnover. But
Right.
Civic Actions, we kind of have a special thing going on, and we just want to share that with everybody.
That's
So how
excellent.
we approach it, there doesn't need to be this much stress in GovCon.
Right.
We can make it
Right. Kind of
easier.
alleviate it as much as you can ahead of time, which is
Mhm.
that's a good thing to think about. That's great. Ron, did you have
One
any other thoughts around the different resources that are available? Anything that kind of stood out to you, or anything that you would suggest for this audience to kind of pay attention to as they kind of move forward?
Yeah, definitely. As a matter of fact, why don't you scroll down a little bit to I think it's the or try tools and support. Um,
Right there. Yeah.
right
Oh, yeah.
underneath of additional resources, tools and support, right
Right
there.
there.
Yeah, there are a ton of useful tools in here. I'm not just saying that because some of them are ours. Ton of useful stuff. I mean, you have a bunch of things that look at JobScan, interviewprep.ai. You've got learning platforms. You've got some GPTs that have been created by David Valencia, the gentleman I mentioned from Department of Transportation. We've got job boards. And as a matter of fact, speaking to that point, there'll be an event at the Carasoft building March 25th. So that's about 2 weeks from today, where we'll be debuting a solution, a free solution for job seekers in the federal contracting market.
Great.
And if you go back to the top, you'll also see that there's some free business development tools as well. So please do check these tools out. You guys can reach out to me. Here's what I'll do. I'll put my direct email address in here
Yeah, it'll be on the
so
last
that
one.
you can reach out. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, this is great. I'm just, all of this information in one spot is really cool. And you're right. I think it's kind of digging into each of these kind of categories from G2X, from A2I, from other sources, obviously CivicActions, DSC, and just kind of finding what works for you and hopefully learning something as you're going through. So this is really great. I think we can go ahead and open it up if there are any questions. Marianne, if you want to kind of just restate the ground rules here.
Hang on 1 second. I am running slides.
Okay.
I'll have you know. If
right.
anybody has any questions, you can pop them into the Q&A box. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen, and Scott will address them. Or if you want to ask them live, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you.
Anyone out there got a question?
While we're waiting, I think it's really great to note that how Ron just shared his email directly with everybody, and his whole team is that way. So Alexa over at G2X, another great personality there, that's like, hey, let me help you. Let me share the knowledge in my head continuously. I mean, it's really a special organization. So I just like to brag on him any chance I get and embarrass him.
Yeah,
It's great, Keith.
yeah, appreciate it, Keith. Appreciate it. We just try to be open and helpful, right? And you shouldn't have to, be a private investigator to get in touch with us or find out how to get in touch with us.
That's right. And speaking of which, we all have our email addresses here on this last slide. So we'll keep that up. We'll still kind of leave it open for any questions that folks have. But go ahead and maybe zap this with your phone and take a screenshot. But we want to all be open and kind of there to help you navigate and kind of make it through kind of what everybody is going through right now. And as Ron mentioned, they do have another event coming up on March 25th. And you can find out all about G2X's events and basically all industry events by going to G2X and looking at their events calendar. And they kind of keep track of everything that's happening within our industry. And it's a really great resource. So Traci, you got a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say, while people are thinking of the questions, maybe there's a question we can pose to everybody, and that is, what do you need? And if you have an opportunity to put that into the chat box right now, or want to share with us something that you're looking for, or what made you join this webinar that we may or may not have answered, would love to know what that is. So you don't necessarily have to have questions about the site itself or anything, but what is a resource, or what is something that would be helpful now? And maybe we can chat about that, or try to figure out where does that source exist. So if anybody has anything directly that they might want to get from this community, as we're standing here having this kind of community conversation, what does that look like? If anybody has any specific needs.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Traci. So yeah, if anybody does have any ideas or any other questions that they would want answered, or the things that they'd want to see as a resource that they need, please let us know. All right. Well, we have all of this information here. What we will do for everyone is make sure that we send out the webinar recording so that you can go back and kind of hear about and look at the different things that we discussed today. Again, make sure you take note of those email addresses. And we are here for you. If you have any questions after we wrap today, please do reach out to us. And I'd like to personally thank Keith and Traci and Ron and Marianne for bringing this together today and having everybody kind of get on the line and share information and hopefully help folks as much as we can get through kind of what everybody is going through right now. So Thanks a lot for your time today, everybody. And please get in touch
Thank
with
you.
us if you have any questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care
everyone.
now.
Take care.
All right.